Welcome, everybody. My name is Amma van Danzig, and it is such a great pleasure to be invited here as the moderator of this session, this Wereld Café, of a rather sticky topic, isn't it? It's called Shift the Power. When we talk about power, people get nervous because we're not quite sure what we mean, who has power, who doesn't have power, who's abusing power, like how old is this power? We're trying to understand what is the power and what needs to shift for change to happen. Because ultimately, I guess when we talk about shifting the power, it's because we sense that something needs to transform, something needs to change. Some of the people who are having this conversation include Bart Romein, the director of Partos, who's sitting here with me in the studio. We have Zora Mosa, the director of Mama Cash. We have Moses Isoba, the director of Uganda National NGO Forum and partners at the Giving for Change Alliance. And then we have Maite Smet, who is the coordinator of Global Alliance for Green and Gender Action. Lovely that you all join us, also from different places. Moses is joining us from Uganda. Maite is joining us from Chile. Zora is joining us all the way from Amsterdam. And we are here in a studio in Amersfoort, Bart and I.
One of the key issues in development cooperation, maybe the main issue, is dealing with power. Yeah. There's a lot of people that don't have access, that don't have any decision power about governance, resources, access to services, justice, and there is a limited group of actors that do have this access and that do have the say how to deal and how to manage, which is a root cause of many issues like misuse of natural resources, of poverty, exclusion, conflicts. So that's also the bigger question why we want to address the shift to power or sharing power and more balanced and more fairly shared power.
I mentioned a dream paper. So a dream paper has been developed that gives practical tips and tools. And this is what we'll be discussing with our 4 guests. 135 people all around the world talking about this dream paper. So how are we going to shift power? And so that sounds like a very juicy topic. For me, in any case. I'm really curious, what stood out for you? What are some of the juicy bits? What are the things that really stood out for you in this process?
In the outcome of this process?
Yeah, in the outcome.
Well, there's many things, so let me just name 3.
Okay, thank you.
So first is that look at yourself. Look at your own organization, look at the system you work in, that you, as I said, deliberately or unconsciously consolidate, and that triggers and strengthens the differences in power. We composed a kind of power awareness tool to have a kind of assessment of your own relationships, of your own organization, who's making the decisions, and is that well balanced? So that's one. So look at yourself, at your own organization and your relationships. That's the first kind of very strong recommendation that came out of these papers. The second one is don't see relationships and partnerships, don't consider them as a kind of transactional thing. So there is a fund, there is a program, and you make your arrangements and you work within that program. So look at it from a larger picture. Don't start the relationship when there is a call for proposals. No, please build and invest in trust in the partnerships long time before and long time after. Yeah. And that's not only in terms of time, but also in terms of participants. Because normally when you have a kind of a subsidy scheme, there are the formal organizations that are the implementers. There's lead agency, there are other implementers. But there's of course a lot of other organizations, movements and so on. And if you don't relate to them, you will never achieve the change you want to. Yeah. So that was the second thing. So don't think in transactional terms, but think of transformative terms. And the third one, and I think you referred to that already, we need to look at our own language from many aspects. I was referring already to decolonization of aid. So we have a lot of terminology. We have perceptions that we know better than others and so on. And to be honest, I also very often think that I know things better than others. That's something intrinsic in me, that's intrinsic in organizations. And it's also part of the North-South relationships. The North knows better than the South. That's something that we have to realize and to get rid of. At the same time, so we have to look at language, terminology, but as you said, let's try to avoid that we bog down in semantics.
What were for you some of the most important insights from this process and from the paper, or maybe conclusions or insights?
I think for me, really, the most important aspect that, first of all, the process and making sure that this was a process for co-creation between the southern civil society actors and northern civil society actors. That for me really, stood out quite, strongly. It was not one of those days when we receive, articles, papers written from the north and then downloaded in the south. So this was an opportunity that we could actually, as southern practitioners, we could have our thoughts into the paper. And for each of the papers, there are about, I think, 4 papers that are put together. One looking at partnerships, one looking at resource mobilization, one looking at strategy, and one looking at communication. The writing was paired. We had, somebody from the south co-authoring it with somebody from the north. So that for me, as just as a process in itself, it is something that I think was quite very good for me. But then, besides the process, when you look at each of these different papers that together have been synthesized into one, I mean, it was each of them really brings out very, very unique aspects. I mean, for instance, if you just take the partnership paper, I mean, the fact that we're able to go back and forth and see what is it we're talking about. Are we talking about funding relationship, or are we talking about partnerships? Because I think what we do have right now from the southern perspective are funding relationships. We haven't yet reached to talk about partnerships. But even when we are really discussing these papers, we even went further that maybe what we should be dreaming about is not even a partnership, but a collaboration. Because from the collaboration, there's going to be contestation. Because oftentimes when we talk about partnership, we assume it's a plane, everything is equal. But yet in this kind of relations, there's going to be contestation. And in a collaboration, you kind of like have the push and pull, which is always going to be there. So that for me, really, in that paper, stood out quite strongly. Mm-hmm. But even more challenging is in the communication, the language that we use. Language is really what determines our thinking, our being, and our thinking itself. And actually, language sets the terms for relational engagement. And so we, in the development arena, language determines so much. Even when we talk about shifting power, there is language. When we talk about sharing power, there is language. And I mean, we often hear our northern brethren, when they come to the south, they say they are going to the field. And one wonders, whose field are you going to? And what is a field anyway? If you're in Amsterdam, perhaps your backyard could be the field. So when you come to visit in Uganda, why are you saying you are coming to the field? What are you coming to do at the field? Are you coming to dig?
As you were talking, I'm also wondering, were there blind spots? Were there things that you were missing in the dream paper, in the process, perhaps that you wished was more in it or was not in it at all after you saw the whole? Sometimes we need to see the whole before we can see what's missing.
One of the things that I really found missing is that, I don't see the voices of the people, because, the theater of activity for development is with the people. And it's such that the people who know the solution to their problem. I always want to put a high premium on the subsidiarity principle, that those closest to the problem know the solution.
Zora, would you like to add something here in terms of also your experience at Mama Cash and the role we ourselves have in creating this shift or share of power?
Once the decision was made, everything else was difficult, disruptive, but not destructive. In the end, we came up with a model that we have had extremely positive feedback about. that our staff, our colleagues, my colleagues are really happy about. The feedback we got from the community members that we're working with, the activists that we're working with, was extremely positive. They were so excited. They were like, this is amazing. How can we help? And we've also been able to increase the dialogue with donors about why this matters and why shifting the power and sharing the power in this way really matters. But I have to say that the difficult step was really taking the decision that we were going to give up power here. We were going to give up decision-making power, which also means control. I went from being the person who made the final approval on every single grant that Mama Cash makes to having strangers make those decisions for me. And that's not easy. But once we made the decision, the rest of it was like, all right, let's do this. And it's been a wonderful, amazing experience.
Maite, what would you, this big question, how would you bring it back to Gaga and your experiences? What do you think needs to happen to change the system? And you talked a little bit already about your relationship with the Women's Fund and how that makes things difficult for you. But perhaps there are more non-procedural things that need to happen.
No, I think one of the things that I would like to highlight is that, and I think this builds on Zora's point, is this idea that we need to be able to build relationships of trust, and these have to be long-standing relationships going beyond a project or a specific funding project, right? So this is one of the nice experiences that we've had with Gaga. So we are able to work in 28 countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and really support community-based organizations and local movements in those spaces with flexible funding, but also capacity strengthening support. And we're able to do that because we have these relationships with funds and NGOs who are from the movements, are rooted there and know the context very well. So this idea of trust, read their papers, know that their knowledge is there. That's what really should be driving our work, right?
Moses, I have here that in a recent interview, you said that if Western NGOs don't transform, that they will cease to exist. These are pretty prophetic, this is quite a prophetic statement. What did you mean when you said that? Is there anything you want to share with us about this? And what does that then mean? How should they then transform?
I think basically the wind of change is blowing, and the Northern NGOs, as some people have said in other circles, have got on the three options. One is transform. The second one is die well. The last one is die badly.